Each of you, we're glad you're here, glad that you have taken the time to be here, thankful for the dads. We will say a word about dads as we get into this lesson, the second part in a series where we're talking about different passages in the New Testament that use this term, one another. And one another represents to us the church that Jesus had in mind, because this is such a regular occurrence. It is just defines in many ways the kind of church that Jesus really wanted to have, a church that would have what it needed to endure, to grow, and to reach people and to connect with people. Last week we talked about the concept of forgiveness and forgiving one another, and this week we are going to talk about the idea of encouraging one another. Encouragement is something that we all need. There are several texts actually in the New Testament. There are some that there are several that talk about the idea of encouraging. I want to really just focus and briefly, but it's also going to set the groundwork for what we're going to talk about through the rest of this morning. A passage from the book of Hebrews, in Hebrews chapter 3. Hebrews is written to a group of people who are really kind of struggling to hold on. Some of them are struggling not because, as so often happens, the way they were barely holding on was not because they fell and they just suddenly one day woke up and they said, "I'm through with Jesus." That doesn't happen as frequently. It can happen occasionally. But much more frequently what happens is we drift, right? It's like the human thing that we tend to have this problem where we just drift a little bit each day. And what happens if you drift a little bit, and you've heard the analogies, if you've got a ship go out in the middle of the ocean and you're off 1 degree and you stay off 1 degree for a few hours, you're suddenly going to be very far from where you're supposed to be. And so what can happen to us as Christ followers is we get off just a little bit, and that little bit leads to a little bit more bit. I have a lot of bits. And a little bit more. I heard a comedian this week, it was Jerry Seinfeld, he was talking about if you say the same word in the sentence twice, that it delivers a lot of power. And he went through, it's really a fun little bit, but he was, it's like, it's really interesting how we will. So, bit. And a bit, and a bit, and a bit, and all of a sudden, we're totally off course. And that's really what Hebrews was written to, a group of Jews. It was written to Jews, to the Hebrews, and it was written to them because they were struggling to hold the rope. And it was really a book about recentering on the fact that Jesus is the better answer, and not to get pulled back into the Pharisaical system that was happening in their world in their time. Well, Hebrews 3 talks about this. It says, "See to it, brothers, that none of you has a sinful, unbelieving heart that turns away from the living God." Now, that sounds like Christianity, like in a lot of ways you could just kind of, this is some of it, just be sure you stay there. But he does more than that. Here's what he says, "But encourage one another daily, as long as it is called today, so that none of you may be hardened by sin's deceitfulness." So I want you to notice that encouragement is actually considered to be the antidote to sin. I don't know if you've ever thought about that. I've always thought about sin, and if you said, well, what's the antidote to sin? I might use the term righteousness. And that's not inaccurate, but this Hebrew layer says if you encourage one another daily, you're going to be able to prevent yourself from falling into the lies and the deceit of sin. Encouragement and sin, if you think about it, really are kind of opposites, aren't they? Just think about it. Encouragement is this building up that happens, and sin is this pulling away that happens. And so if you really want to, sometimes we think that, I want to be a better Christian, I just got to try harder. And we just go through these cycles and we try harder for a few minutes. And I would encourage you maybe to step back from that mentality of I just got to try harder and start asking yourself, what am I feeding into other people and what am I getting fed into me from other people? It's not just about trying harder individually. It has a lot to do with what are you surrounding yourself with daily. And Hebrews suggests that if you'll surround yourself daily with encouragement, and if you'll encourage others and others will encourage you, you will be able to resist the temptation to drift away, the temptation that they faced. So encouragement speaks life. Encouragement is life-giving, life-breathing. It's about pouring into what we are. And sin does quite the opposite of that. Sin doesn't draw you closer to people and build you up with people. Sin isolates you from people. When sin takes over, you start pulling away from the very people that you need to be around to encourage you to continue on in this life of faithfulness to Jesus. And so I would encourage you to kind of start thinking about sin and encouragement as opposites. And if a Bible class teacher ever says, what's the opposite of encouragement? You can say sin. And they'll be like, that's weird. Because that's not the first thing that comes to mind, but I really think Hebrews says that. It says, hey, if you encourage each other so you can stay away from sin. So you can pull away from that. The word for encouragement there is a Greek word, and if you see the first four letters, you'll see para, which you kind of know that concept is parallel lines to walk beside, and it's really about to call alongside. It's a mutual thing that happens. It's not encouraging, sometimes we'll do that. I encourage you to do this, but it's not that, right? I encourage you. I encourage you. One of the things about counsel I heard say is, you start with these I statements. And we really want to, when you deal with people, you want to think about how you can do better and want to use I statements. And one of the things they said, but the third word can't be you, right? I feel you are a bad example. I feel you did this. You just turn an I statement into a you statement, right? And so I would encourage you to realize that encouragement is a walking alongside. It's not a, I think you should do this. It's a, I think we should do this. I think we should call ourselves to better faithfulness. I think we should hold on to the hope that Jesus Christ was resurrected from the dead and that he will come back and that this is not all for nothing. I think we should do this. It's a walking alongside. And one of the things about a walking alongside is the strengthener gets strengthened. That's one of the beautiful things about being an encourager is, who gets encouraged? Encouragers. You feed into other people, and people are going to be much more prone to feel comfortable around you, to be present with you, to be able to feed into you. And encouragement is not just, by the way, comfort. It's not just about feeling better. It's actually part of being spiritually disciplined. It's a part of the life of a Christ follower. And so I would argue that encouragement is a spiritual discipline. It is how a spiritual discipline is something we do to keep us connected to God. It's habits we form in our life to keep us connected to God. So I would encourage you, if you think about habits that you have to keep you connected to God, maybe you grew up thinking, you read your Bible and you pray, you do these things. Start thinking about the fact that encouragement is a process that we use in order that we can walk alongside other people and remain faithful. It's a spiritual discipline. Make sure encouragement is part of your life. I've always been a little fascinated by this guy that if you ever do a sermon on encouragement, you have to say his name because that's just the rules. I don't make the rules. It just is the rules that you have to talk about Barnabas if you're going to talk about encouragement. But here's the thing that always kind of confused me is Barnabas, other than being called a son of encouragement, there's just not a whole lot there that tells about him, other than Paul wanted to point out that he was an encouraging person. What is present about him is really interesting. It was just, it clicked with me this week what happened. The son of encouragement, and Paul calls him that, the son of encouragement, he shows up a couple of different places, a few different places in Scripture, and he shows up at some of the hardest the times for the absolute hardest conversations to be had. Barnabas is the one who brings Paul alongside him to go to a bunch of people who are scared to death of Saul, because Saul is the guy that persecutes Christians. So in Acts 9, Barnabas is the one that comes in and begins the hard conversation. Paul and Barnabas walking side by side. In Acts 15, there's a huge dispute in the church. And Paul and Barnabas go to what we call the Jerusalem Council. It's a group where a bunch of elders, the town's elders and the elders from different towns, this council of people would come. And how we do eldership now is really a little bit different. And so they would all come together to make decisions about the church. And there's a big decision that's got to be made. And you think of who's going to speak first, and you probably would think that Paul would speak first. But it's really interesting that there it says Barnabas is listed first. It says Barnabas and Paul, which usually means that Barnabas is the one who became the key speaker or the one that really kicked off the conversation. So we don't really know a whole lot about how Barnabas encouraged people. We know that Paul wanted us to remember him as an encourager. But here's what we do know about Barnabas. Barnabas was present when hard conversations had to be had. He was the one that seemingly was the one who would come in during this time and be present when hard conversations are to be had. And that makes a lot of sense. Because think about what encouragement does. Encouragement builds the trust, the foundation that truth depends on. I can speak truth to you, but it will not matter if you do not trust me in any way. You can have somebody who you do not trust, maybe someone who has lied to you over and over and over again, and they may speak truth, and there's actually, there's an old story that goes along with the boy who cried wolf, right? Cry wolf, and then when there's an actual wolf, there's no reason to listen. So here's what I do know about Barnabas. I know that Barnabas was an encourager. And then when we see how he encourages, we don't see a whole lot, but we do see him be the one that has to show up and have hard conversations. And that lets me know that Barnabas was the type of person that you wanted to have in the room when you had a hard conversation. If you've got 5 or 6 bulls, lions, we did... there's a character study and you can identify with a character. If you've got 5 lions in a room having a conversation with somebody, that's just not a good recipe for what's going to happen. Lions are, personality things. You need some what we call golden retrievers in the room. Some people who think about how what we do right now impacts other people. It's one of the calls I've said when thinking about building elderships is so often we fill eldership rooms with lions. I'm not talking about us here as much as just generally. We fill and like sometimes the quiet, meek people get left out of those conversations. And I've been able to experience that sometimes those quiet and meek people are the ones who think about how decisions are going to impact people better than anybody else. We need Barnabases in the room. Those who are encouraging, and they may not speak as often, but when they speak, people will listen. And so that's what being an encourager does. And I would encourage you to think about having hard conversations. And when you're having conversations on a congregational level, we need to think about who's in the room. And making sure we have encouragers in the room, because that's the biblical model that Barnabas says. And so Barnabas led because he encouraged. Barnabas' spirit made a space that other people were able to grow, and people trusted him to have hard conversations. And it's really interesting that in those 2 passages we mentioned where Barnabas is really present, we have really good outcomes in some really difficult situations that could have turned really bad in the moment. But that's not what happened. People trusted him to have those hard conversations. So this is where I want to shift for just a minute and talk to dads in the room. If you're a dad or may be a dad or about to be a dad, or if you're any kind, even if you're just a male figure who has influence on people that are younger than you, I want to talk to you for just a minute. Before I do, I want to make this phrase is something that I've started using a little bit. Mirrors before microscopes. It's that whole thing about the log in your own eye, the speck in the other. Look at yourself before you start talking to others. And I want to say this here because I want to tell you that I don't always feel I'm the best encourager. I actually feel like I do fairly well for an hour on Sundays when I feel like I've got to be on, or an hour and a half on Sundays. But I also have a really big out of sight, out of mind problem where sometimes I don't take on this daily encouragement role the way I wish I would, not only with church people, but also with the people in my family that I see each and every day, because they're in sight, but they're always there. And so sometimes I don't feel like I'm the type of builder-upper that I want to be. And so I just want you to know that if anything here sounds a little harsh to you, I've spent some time in the mirror this week thinking about this and thinking about how I can be a better encourager in my own home and in the church here. And so you might say, well, Daniel wasn't a really good encourager for me, and that very well may be true. And I just want you to know, one, tell me, please communicate with me. And two, I want you to know that it's something I realize I have to work on. Now, I'm not a microscope to you, but I'm going to ask you to turn the mirror around for yourself and ask yourself what kind of encourager you are being in your home. If encouragement is the antidote for sin, right? If daily encouragement, what Hebrews tells us in Hebrews 3, daily encouragement is the antidote to sin, and it lays the groundwork for having how to handle and have difficult situations and conversations, then dads, we've got to be masters of encouragement. There has been, for many of you were raised in generations where the role of the dad was to be stoic, to not necessarily have to be present emotionally in the home. And let me just tell you, that is an American individual thing. It's not a God thing. And it needs to die with this generation. We need men who are emotionally invested in their home and who are building their kids up. If our kids only hear criticism from us, if they only hear when something's wrong, if we're only present when we're going to try to fix a problem, if we don't feed into them, we're not going to be the Barnabas in the situation. We're instead going to come into the conversation and then we're going to leave the conversation. Why did that not go right? Well, the reason it didn't go right was not necessarily what you said in that moment. It may have had something to do with what you said in that moment, but it was because we didn't lay the groundwork with daily encouragement. You want your kids to sin less. Here's the unique thing about this. If you'll just build and feed your kids and you'll build them up with encouragement, you're going to have less difficult situations to even have to deal with. But you're also going to have when the difficult situations do happen, you're going to be in a place where you have the respect of your children already in place and you're able to go into these hard conversations. Parents, you need to have the hard conversations with your kids. Kids are going to have to face hard conversations, and they need somebody in their life that models for them what it means and how it's supposed to happen to have hard conversations. Parents, if you're parents, listen to me. This is going to sound weird. Learn how to fight in front of your kids fairly. I used to think that the best thing was for the parents not to ever fight in front of the kids, to go to the bedroom, close the door, and the kids just believe that the parents never fought. And I've come to realize after dealing with some people, that's a really terrible plan because kids never learn how to have disagreements in a peaceful way. Don't go close the door. Learn how to have, now if there may be times you've got to separate, but let me just encourage you to have difficult conversations in front of your kids in love and peace, and show them that two people can disagree and still love each other deeply. I've worked with some, I tell you, one of the couple dynamics I see more than anything is when a person who marries a family and the parents never saw them fight. And so that person comes out thinking, well, married couples don't actually fight. That's just something that happens on TV, right? And then you got this other person over here, and all they did in their house was fight and scream and yell and throw things at each other. And what do you have? You come into a relationship. It's crazy. Those people typically marry each other. And you come into a relationship, and nobody knows how to handle conflict. So dads, let me just encourage you. You're going to have to handle conflict in your kids if you want them to be what you want them to be. And if you want to have those conversations well, you need to be feeding encouragement into your kids and building them up. That's how you're going to make resilient kids. So if you want to build, we always want to say, men, we want to raise tough kids. If you want to raise a tough, resilient kid, it's not by being harsh and stoic and distant and telling them to toughen up in life. It's walking through tough things with them in their life. It's being emotionally available in your home and being a daily encourager. And so on this Father's Day, you're thinking about fatherhood, and this is about celebrating you. And I really want to celebrate you, but I also want to give you this word of wisdom to make sure that you're being an encourager in your home. Where you lead in your home is not about decision making. It's about the example that you're setting day in and day out. There will be times, according, I think, to the model God said, that a male may have to make some decisions in the home to lead the home. But you cannot make decisions in the home and expect anybody to follow your lead if you haven't done the groundwork of being a day-to-day encourager in your home, encouragement of your kids and your spouse, and being present in that. And let me give you a couple other little tidbits of wisdom. Some you've heard from me before, maybe some of you may not have, but I want to remind you that whatever you celebrate in your home, it gets celebrated, and whatever gets celebrated in a church, it gets duplicated. This is just 101 to life. If you give a child a sucker for doing something, they're going to want to do that thing more and more. But let me just tell you, it's not just about suckers. There's something more powerful than suckers. There's something more powerful than candy. And that is the love and the respect that a dad can give. And if you want kids that are resilient and tough and are these daily encouragers, you've got to do that. You can't expect them to become something different than what you are. And so remember to be the type of person, the type of man, and this applies to moms too, but on Father's Day I want to pick on you men a little bit. Be the type of person that you want to raise. Ask yourself the question. Sometimes we'll say, well, we want our kids to be better than me. I want your kids to be better than you too, but they're not going to be better than you if you choose to remain where you are. They need to see growth. They need to see you striving. They need to see involvement and engagement in their lives. And it's not all about the quantity of time. It's about being intentional, having hard conversations, like really paying attention to what you're doing in life and making sure you're building kids up. Kids want to see the encouragement from their dads. And so hear me when I say, I want to celebrate you today, but I want to put a fire under you leaving out of this Father's Day to go be the type of person you want to raise. And if you are stoic and distant, you will raise stoic and distant kids most likely. If you are engaged and you are thinking about the emotions of others and you are present with them, that's the type of kid that you're going to raise. And they're going to pick your nursing home. So just remember that, okay? Encouragement is a legacy. It's something we leave behind. One of the beautiful things about sitting at a graveside is that we can remember that we don't bury memories. It's one of the I'll do that at funerals quite often. 3 things we don't bury, and one of them's you don't bury memories, you don't bury influence, and you don't bury a soul. We don't bury memories and we don't bury influence. Your words will become voices in your children's head. I mean, sometimes even literally, by the way. But what you feed into your children will be the thoughts that circulate in their head day in and day out. And it can do one of 2 things. It can build courage, and it can build resilience and the ability to sit and have tough conversations and deal with tough things, or it can build trauma. And every time you build trauma in your life, in your children's life, by not laying the right foundations and not having the hard conversations the right way, it's another little layer on top of the onion that hides, what I believe, hides the image of God that's supposed to be living in them. It's these little parts of you that are trying to protect you, but they don't know, they're just only being fed what they're taught. And so let me just encourage you to know, It is both a terrifying and a wonderful thing to remember that the words that you use are going to be voices in your child's head for the rest of their life. And they may not even always associate it with you, but they're there and they were planted by you. And so we have a great responsibility. And this is not just to dads, this is to all of us. And it's not just, by the way, to family relationships. It's also how we talk to one another. What you hear in this hour and a half impacts what you do the rest of the week. It impacts how you go out in life. And if what you hear in a room like this is traumatic, and it can be traumatic, it can be very real that traumatic things happen in rooms like this one right here. And it can be the voices that leave in those heads, and it can cause major problems. But it also can be a place where we build each other up, where we encourage, where we become resilient and able to fight the world that we're going to face. So think of this place and your homes as a greenhouse, not a courtroom. Not a place where we just come in and lay down the law without grace and mercy. Rather, this is a greenhouse. This is a place where we help each other grow. This is a place where I help water other people. This is a place where we plant seeds together. This is a place where grace can grow and flourish, and we can become what God called His church to be. Let me just hear this, and you'll hear me say this from time to time. But I don't know if I've ever said it quite this way. Bad theology, what you believe about God, and bad ecclesiology, what you believe about the church and how the church functions, very really impacts you. And if your focus is merely on judgment and it's merely on figuring out what other people did wrong and laying down the road, if you're just naturally the rule keeper in the room, hear me clearly, the way you treat people in those circumstances and situations are going to impact what they do when they leave these rooms. And let me just encourage you to think of this place not as a law room where we've got to figure out how to make everybody keep the right rules, but rather it's a place where we're going to feed each other spiritually. And when you get knocked down, when you're sick, when your vine's wilting, instead of chopping you off, this is a place we're going to try to water people. We're going to try to give them nutrients. We're going to try to build people up. And I always want to end this as the challenge for all of us, and that's this. Ask yourself, who is becoming more like Jesus because of the way that you're speaking to them? And this impacts every conversation you have. Will the cashier at lunch today, will the waitress at lunch today, will your employees that work for you, will they, because of their interactions with you, look more like Jesus, or will they look less like Jesus? And so let me encourage you to ask yourself the question, who in my world is becoming more like Jesus because of the way that I speak to them? If you can't find an answer to this question, I'm not looking at you with a microscope. I'm just encouraging you to look into the mirror and myself to look into the mirror and ask this difficult question, because encouragement is the very antidote to sin. It is the way that we make it through this life. And so let's tell each other that we love them. Let's tell each other that we care about them, that we're pulling for them, that we want to see them succeed, we want to see them grow. Look to your neighbor right now. Tell them that you love them. No, right now. Find a neighbor. I don't care if you don't know them. Just tell them. Speak words to them. Tell them you love them. I heard I love you too. I like that. And let me make this we're going to have a song in a minute. The song is about bondage to sin. And the way we overcome bondage is by encouraging one another. And so if you've got spiritual needs, we're going to talk about that. Let me just encourage you. Hear me, okay? Hear me. I know some of you are just not people person. I know some of you are ready to get out because people drain you and you've had all you can take. Okay? I get it. Find somebody in this room before you leave today and speak a word of encouragement to them. Find somebody you don't normally speak to. Find somebody that you've seen something in. You may have just been sitting with somebody and said, man, your kids were really well behaved today. I just want you to know you're doing a good job. Keep it up. Find one person at least. I mean, I'd love for you to find all of us, but find one person before you leave this room, and let's speak a word of encouragement into them today. You may need more than one word of encouragement from one person. You may need the prayers of us all, and if that's the case, we're going to sing a song, and you can let that be known. We want you to be a part of God's family. We want you to be a part of the church that Jesus had in mind. And if you're not part of that church, we'd love to talk to you about that. We want you to join us in this mission, the mission to build each other up and push us towards to glory, push us to eternity. And by the way, I love the hug down here. It's happening right now. She's telling her she loves it. She's not listening to me, which is great. Y'all are just encouraging each other. I love it. You're doing homework. Find somebody that you don't normally do that to, though. You're not through with your homework. There you go. Find somebody that you don't normally talk to, and just feed them today. Let's feed each other. If you've got a need you need to let know for the whole church, we'll do that now. We'll stand. We'll sing.
Jesus, I come.